All right. Guess I'm filling in briefly to figure out whatever the deal is. So my name is Hawke, I'm founder of the RPG Research Project. Been on for about 10 years. I'm a student at Eastern Washington University. We're the interdisciplinary degree in recreation therapy, music therapy, research psychology, and neuroscience. And the main thing I'm working on is trying to establish the effects of role-playing games of all types, tabletop, live action, and computer-based, on people. And so part of it starts with the history of role-playing games when they first came out, backlash in the 80s, the satanic panic welcome in the 80s, the attack on the gamers. Yeah, which now is the Dark Dungeons movie, which is a little bit of homage to that kind of period. And what happened was that then triggered a bunch of research to be done to see, well, okay, it's a popular game. Are the claims of suicide, homicide, antisocial behavior true? So they did a lot of correlated and metadata studies. I mean, it's correlated is looking for associations, and metadata looks at much existing research and data together to look for patterns. There really wasn't a whole lot of causal data where they established a baseline, did something, had participated in the game, measured that, not a whole lot of that, but a lot of correlative and meta-analysis. In the correlative and meta-analysis, A, they disproved the suicide rate for gamers is somewhere between 1/5 to 1/20 of that of non-gamer peers, based on the data or the people claiming that people tend to cause suicide. So there you go. So taking the data of those who say it causes it, even though that's refuted, based on that and the existing data, the suicide rate is a fraction of non-gamers. Number two, homicidal tendencies or violent tendencies. Most gamers, for whatever reason, we're focusing mostly on tabletop right now. This includes live action and computer-based and other aspects. But for tabletop gamers, also for some reason, significantly lower level of aggressive behavior or tendency to want to fight and such in the real world. Maybe it's cathartic, who knows, there's all sorts of arguments about that. What's that?
Right, social aspect of gaming.
All sorts of possible theories.
And if you're social, you're less antisocial and therefore less likely to be.
And so that would be the antisocial aspect. Right? He says, oh, well, gaming makes you're either, an antisocial person or it makes you antisocial. But instead they actually found, and those of us who game, we all know, it's a social game. If you're truly antisocial, this is not the activity you're wanting to engage in. And for those who maybe are struggling with social skills, it's a great way to develop that. And you see both types in the gaming community. So statistically, they saw no prevalence of antisocial in the gaming community for most tests. So those are all great correlative bits, but it doesn't really prove causality. Because the question is, well, were certain types of people drawn to gaming, let them exercise so in the testing, people tended to have better math skills, better reading skills, better problem-solving skills, better social skills, despite the stereotypes. But was it because these people who had these abilities were drawn to the game so they could exercise them? Or were gamers coming from a different, let's say they like Conan or Star Wars or something like that, and then some friend said, oh, you like that movie, you like that comic, we have a game where you can play that and try it out. And then they develop the skills, not really established. It's a big question about the causality. So one of my overarching goals is to try to establish causality over time. It will take years and years and years to do that. But meanwhile, lots of little piecemeal projects building on the evidence. There is, to date, not counting my research, between 70 to 100 research projects that have been published, depending on what you count as research. There's a give or take of 30 or so because some of them are arguably not well structured and didn't exactly follow the right methodology, etc. So, but 70 to 100 is a pretty safe range. And again, a lot of them really reinforcing the stereotypes of the population for most people. Again, you always have exceptions. So that was the 80s. That triggered a lot of this research. A lot of those stereotypes have been inculcated into the culture. You see them now in popular media and Big Bang Theory and everything. And I've run into places, different locations where it's an issue. So it's kind of there, whether it's real or not. People have this viewpoint about it. But meanwhile, those of us who believe there's a potential benefit are trying to establish A, causality, and B, develop it as a tool for education and for therapy. There's quite a few places using role-playing games, tabletop, live action, and computer-based, for education. That one doesn't seem to have as much resistance, or at least lack of background, as the therapeutic side. There are a number of schools throughout the United States and other countries that at different levels use different variations of tabletop role-playing gaming, computer-based role-playing gaming, live action role-playing gaming to teach mainstream subjects, whether it's history, whether it's math, whether it's science, whether it's philosophical debate. They all have language. There's several use for language. So there's a workshop in California, which I'm going to mention, called Abernathy. It's around 25 years in California, and she has workshops originally like a summer camp for role-playing games. And she bring in teenagers and such, and get them off the streets and such, and do these role-playing games and develop social skills. And it was helping them work on cooperative problem solving and solutions to violence and theft to come up with solutions to problems. So that's called Abernathy. My website's rpgresearch.com. I have a whole bunch of links to existing projects around the world. In the short time I have, I can't cover all of them, but I'll try to do a quick rundown. There is a school, and I always have trouble pronouncing it, so I'm not going to start at this point, in the Netherlands. I think it's like close to the college. But they teach 2 years of high school using live action role-play. They teach English, German, and Dutch, math, science, and 1 or 2 other topics, all through one. The entire 2 years. It's a boarding school. It's actually technically considered a public school. It's paid for through taxes and such. It's not a private school. You go there and as a boarding school, you live there for 2 years, and the students, when they start out, create a scenario. They decide what kind of market setting they will be in. The most recent one I spoke to them a year or so ago was a cruise ship. They decided it would be a cruise ship. Okay, well, I'm going to be students, I'll be a captain, I'll be the engineering crew, I'm going to be this and that. You get assigned roles, and you take on these characters, and then you have to figure out how you're going to run this cruise ship, how you're going to navigate, how you're going to handle these obstacles. And through all of this, and deal with people from other cultures and other languages, and so they're able to create scenarios to turn it into a learning mechanism. They've been doing that for about 8 or 10 years. They've had a lot of success. Now, same problem, no baseline. They didn't do any baseline testing, they don't do any exit testing. But at least the government side of it seems to think that they're at least saying their exit scores are very good. They test very, very well compared to the general population of the schools. So that at least is something. And hopefully someday we'll go up to baseline. Yes?
I was actually not too long ago hired by a local professor to do live action.
Oh, great. Nice. How long a time period was that over?
It was just a couple hours long. It was like the end of the class. I was going to do up to learn. We hired a bunch of us to do some characters from the game, and the kids had to go around and find out
Who did it where, what, yeah. Nice. What was your overall takeaway from that?
It was quite interesting. None of the kids actually got
Did you
it. It wasn't
get
until, because I figured it out. And at the end, there was a they decided to figure out if half the kids knew what, who they thought it was. And the kids thought it was somebody else, and it was me. And so what I did was I did my kids love it. And evidently I started just going back around the room. And they were like, it must be.
Yeah, the guilty party.
Yeah.
Well, did you ever repeat that, or was it just a one-time thing? Okay. Did you have any comments about it when you talked?
Everything's running from
I really liked it.
Okay. And what school was that through?
I don't know.
Elementary, high school, college?
So, you want me to put these back in your boxes? Any paper box you
Go
want?
around the lot of shops during the semester.
There's a cardboard box on this side.
So you're set up? Alright.
Oh,
So
nice.
it's just kind of miscellaneous box.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. That's not one. As I said, more every time I put out the announcement and spread the word, I keep finding more places. I'm trying to make this the central repository for all of these. It's bit by bit, people contact me. The other ones I talk about, this one is in education. This one is probably the only actual therapeutic program in the world that I'm aware of right now, actually running its own with her here. It's in Israel. It is lance.co.il. All in Hebrew. Use Google Translate to get the gist. They're using Warhammer Fantasy World with the social module. We can add on for social game. And they're working with, and actually had some corrections. I was under the impression from the last email from them that they work with the juvenile system. No, they just meant juveniles in general. They're working especially with autistic and other special needs juveniles to help them, especially at-risk teens, to help them work on their social skills, cooperative problem solving, and healthier ways to solve problems rather than less healthy ways. And so now in the third year, they now have 35 participants.
We'll look at
They
those.
have a therapist watch through to a mirror, game master wins the game, therapist is taking notes. At the end of each session, then speaks with the game master, include these particular target goals in the next session for these participants, and they kept doing this iterative process. And that seems to be going fairly well. It started, they're just game shop owners, they own a bunch of game and comic property, and opened up a big store, they had gaming rooms, and they thought, and again, not doing it scientifically, just going with their gut, but he had a therapist friend, and they just gone for it and been implementing it. No baseline testing, no entry stuff, no exit stuff, but it looks very promising. So that's another yes.
So what's the purpose of it? Is it to get people to work in teams or to interact with each other? Or?
Well, so for example, with autism spectrum, one of the biggest issues is just social communication, interaction, and correct reading of cues and such, and not misinterpreting that, and interacting with others rather than just doing off their own. And so it is getting them to step outside of that internal world, interact with others, learn to read facial and other interactions with others who may also be autistic or not. So they neurologically normal peers. Yes? And I'm going to have some quick examples about it because I've been running into a lot of it as well. So that's that group in Israel. So the point I'm trying to point out is the global scope of this. There's a guy in South America, I think Bolivia, I'm forgetting right now. This was kind of last minute, so. And he's now going to Japan, but he went in the 90s and introduced role-playing gaming to the area. He's a huge advocate, he's a PhD, but he's a PhD in like sociology. So he went into role-playing and it started to take off, and he did it through some government agencies to help advertise it. It's a very interesting approach. Now he's going to go try to do the same thing in Japan. Meanwhile, there in the mid-90s, about 94, all of a sudden role-playing games started to take off there. So that was interesting. That was an artificial push on it compared to the more natural growth elsewhere. Let's see. So that's for you. As I said, if you go to rpgresearch.com on the left-hand side, I have links to active projects that we'll know about that you can just click on those various sites. I also have a section for documents, and I have hundreds of documents so far. Every time I can find research, it might just be a link to a university resource where you may or may not be able to get access. But I try to link to or include abstracts, whatever I can, to get as much information in one repository. My website's searchable, you can do a search string and find things. And there's a lot of data there. And part of it too is get the word out. If you know projects, please get back to me so that others can know about it. So my actual work here, I'm still about a year and a half from finishing my degree. I'm a part-time student because I'm a full-time parent. And but I'm almost done with that. And I'm doing it from the recreation therapy perspective. And for some reason, the recreation therapy world has never considered role-playing games. When you say role-playing games, then they think computer-based. And recreation therapists are anything with screens evil. But one question I'll ask is, so first of all, how many of you are gamers? Raise your hand. Yeah, okay. How many of you have or are active tabletop role-playing gamers? Okay, now how about live action? Okay, all right. How about computer-based?
It's kind of like masturbation. It's fun, but not as good as the real thing. Yeah.
Okay. Everybody has individual experiences. What's that?
It means you're not doing it.
Yeah.
Are you playing by yourself? Come on.
Yeah.
I know one of the biggest
It's what?
Oregon Trail.
I don't know where you are.
That is ancient.
Okay.
It's like early.
East Coast Oklahoma.
This is before even that. It's Oregon Trail is text.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I like mush and mud and all that. Okay. So, next question.
But you know, most people
And myself. All right. Well, so the next question is, how many of you work in some sort of health field? Nursing, LPN, CNA, sociology, psychology, therapist, counselor, anything like that? Anyone? You got one back there? Kind of? Oh, well, that totally qualifies. So that, yeah, so that's interdisciplinary, definitely. Okay, so I will try to keep the lingo then less on the therapeutic side and more on the layman side of any game terms we all understand. So I want to make sure I know the audience. But in recreation therapy, they are very much anti-screen. There's some acceptance of weed in long-term nursing centers because it gets them physical and such. But for the most part, they're anti-screen. And so when they hear role-playing games, they just think, oh, that's computers. They don't think it's live action. They don't even realize. So as I've talked to the different recreation therapy associations and memberships and groups around the country, they have no idea what I'm talking about when I say role-playing game, or role-playing game therapy from a recreation therapy perspective. However, as I've gone through all the books and getting towards the certification and all of that for recreation therapy, it is almost a perfect fit between role-playing game and the goals of recreation therapy. One of the things one of the books hammers on repeatedly about is there are so few cooperative social activities in recreation therapy. So many of them are competitive. Now you do have cooperative like ropes courses and challenge courses and things like that, which are very physical. And you have the occasional little icebreaker activity and things like that. But for the most part, a lot of them end up very competitive. Whether it's board games, whether it's physical activities, whether even with social activities, they really get competitive. And of course, tabletop role-playing games especially, with exceptions, is a cooperative shared narrative. The more you cooperate together, the better the time everybody has. When you get too competitive, it tends to fall apart. Again, with exceptions in certain convention settings and other special games that are designed for competitiveness. And so it's a beautiful one-to-one match on many, many points. And so I'm really trying to develop a body of work. So there is a book in the works, not making money on this anything, this is just a PDF out there. But it is trying to list all the different approaches and areas of role-playing help. So we talked about education here, the wide range of education. And that area seems to be getting a fair amount of research, computer-based live action and tabletop. It's the therapeutic side that still has a bit of research, and that's where I'm putting most of my energy. And right now, mostly on tabletop, though I've been able to do a little bit of program development for live action. And I have one for traumatic brain injury with computers. So some populations I've worked with so far, autistic toddlers. We created a live action role-playing game, and it had different stages. And with toddlers, these are like 2.5 to 5-year-olds. And we're talking autistic from mildly to profoundly, and they had neurologically normal peers. And so what we did is, we had to create different activities, and the point was connect it with the story and see if they can connect the story if that changed their motivation, interest, and focus. So whereas other teams went off and created their different recreation therapy type activities, we had a connecting story. And one of the stages is they would take a dive, throw it, and then make the animal sound. But the overarching story was, as they overcame each obstacle, they would get a giant card, and it was to rescue the royal family. So they got a giant jack card. Then they saved the queen by jumping through some hoops of the rings of fire. And as they get that, and when they get to the end, they got a little crown, which we were hesitant because autism spectrum young ones don't like things touching them or on their head, etc. So we're like, okay, well, let's just see how this goes. And so we give them these little paper crowns to put on. And every single one of them, by the time they got through the obstacle course, the story, and the swishing snakes, jump over the jump ropes, etc., we were excited to get the crown and put it on. We had one kid who kept trying to push it on tighter, kept breaking. And then he'd get really upset because his crown was broken. But then they were running around going to the other activities still wearing their crowns. And as I say, one of the ones was make the animal sound, right? And so they would roll dice and just figure out different animals. And so they'd make like a moo sound or a cat sound. Now, the recognition at that age of them for autism spectrum, that's a significant issue. The neurologically normal kids have no problem with it. The autism spectrum ones normally would have trouble with it, but through guidance they did well and enjoyed it. One of them really enjoyed that aspect the most, and she got a bit fixated on it, but it was in a good way, in that it was very productive and she kept enjoying it. And her pattern recognition was instant rare, one of the things had a certain pattern. But it worked out quite nicely, and it was a very positive experience. So that was one of the less 2.5 to 5-year-olds. All we did was add that kind of, instead of just being an obstacle, we added some story to it. And most of them got the connection of the story. The most profound ones didn't quite get the connection of the story, but by adding those little twists to each step of it, they seemed to be more engaged. And the people running this said we've never seen them maintain a stream of activities that long and stay engaged, because they start wandering off and doing their own thing or whatever, and they made it through. And so, possibilities to investigate further. So then the other group is actually a little closer to here. These are autism spectrum youth and adults, all that take surgery. And we have 2 programs, and neither one has yet been implemented, but has been designed. We went through the whole process of design. One is a 1940s case of the missing surgeon. It's just a really simple tabletop game, some 6-sided dice, put together a little kit. It has some minis in it, the basic rules, the adventure, some dice, pencils, just everything you need in one little kit. And then whoever the facilitator is runs them through. And the goal was, for this autism spectrum group, they needed to learn how to use civic resources. So how to find a movie theater, how to find the hospital, how to use a phone book. That's such an alien concept now, but still getting these basic skills for civic resources down, how to find a police officer. And but by doing it through a game, and in meeting with some of the autism spectrum people I'm talking about, and these are higher functioning in that they're older and such. There's a very positive response, and hopefully we'll get more from that. Another one is, this one, hopefully they'll be implementing next year. It's supposed to go on to their schedule in May. And this is to learn how to use the public transit system in Tacoma. So again, with Operation Z8 Tacoma. So we're using kind of an Operation Shield, they say we're the classmates and such, but Operation Shield, Marvel thing. Because the point was, they're not going to be superheroes, and this is both live action and tabletop. So we start with tabletop. They use real maps and real schedules. They find out, they're brought in by various means into the SHIELD office and told, we're not sure, but there's a rumor that a bad guy is going to use the public transit system to spread a virus and turn everything zombies. We don't want to cause a panic. It may be nothing. It came from a homeless person. So we're not sending in the military yet. We want you to go investigate and see if it's true or not. And then they follow the clues and do it in a modern setting, and they just play their characters whatever they are. But they're just basically without superpowers, but they're assisting that. Because the interests of this group were comic books, science fiction, computers, that's their interests. And this is both males and females. It's a good sized group, about 30 or so. And the goal was to make it interesting to learn the bus system. So tabletop play at first. It's through a game. It's less boring than going, well, read the schedule and learn where you can find it. It's like, no, we have to meet such and such this person. Which bus is it? What are the trips are? Well, he's always on this bus going to this location with it. You go to that block, you go to this block. And gain familiarity of the map and how to read the schedule system. Then once everybody's showing competence and confidence in using it in the tabletop setting, have them, their second to last session is to figure out what the bus route is from their house to the central local hub. And then the next week, next session, take that bus to that location in real life, meet there, follow some clues in real life, whether it's posted to somebody pretending to be an NPC, and go catch the bad guy in the final leg of the adventure using the buses in a several hour long half-day trip, and then they come back on the buses. Some of them might be somebody to accompany, but the goal was to get them exposed to and using the transit system. They already tried to do a thing where they put them all on a bus, had the bus people tell them how to use it, rode around on it, and almost none of it stuck. And they were bored, and it didn't go very well for them. That was somebody else's idea. So now they're even more excited about potentially using a game to help them learn without it being onerous about money. So that's just a few examples of what's going on up there, a few little things around the world. Some of the things I'm doing. We have lots of brochures here if you want to grab, some cards if you want. I'm still registering through the website people who want to be involved in research down the road. Right now I'm still not at that, but I'm in about a year and a half away when I can actually start doing some structured studies that will have IRB approval and all of that. And so both gamers and non-gamers are welcome to go sign up on the site because they've had about 150 people so far. And some of them will just be online, just be contacted, asked to fill out an online questionnaire, demographics information. Others, if you're able to do it in person, either in Seattle or Spokane, which is one place right now, you can do it in person for some of the activities. So that's kind of just a real quick, brief overview. If want to be helpful, so please, any additional questions I can answer. There's a lot of information. Hopefully I got at least the very beginnings for you out there. So, questions? No? I covered it for you? Okay. How are you guys doing on that? Still working on it?
Still working on it.
Well, let me, so there, I guess I can, what?
I was actually curious, because you were talking about using games to help people get out of their stuff.
Yes.
Have you heard of the game Ingress?
Ingress?
Yeah, Ingress.
No.
It's a GPS-based game.
Oh, okay. I'm familiar with those types. I don't know that particular one.
It's basically that there's portals all around the world that
Mm-hmm. You got one?
and then you have two teams that need like acting and build fields around them.
Okay.
It's like a area control space. Portals tend to be generated around places of human interest, like statues and museums and things like that.
Okay.
So it's actually a useful tool for getting people out and exercise.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. And there's a zombie run story that I can listen while you're jogging and they're following you. Yeah, there's a bunch of those. So I guess I can cover a couple of topics. I also came with a program for traumatic brain injury recovery, and that includes stroke, not just traumatic brain injury. So the key to traumatic brain injury recovery is triggering neuroplasticity, getting the brain to activate. Now, even just 30 years ago, a lot of people thought, don't disturb them. Somebody has a trauma like that, put them in a quiet, dark room, leave them alone, keep it quiet and peaceful. Don't overstimulate them. It's not bad. They get disturbed and distressed and they don't sleep enough. It's not good for them. But as neuroimaging has developed in recent years, and they started to track these things, actually found out that it's the worst thing you can do for recovery from these, whether it's oxygen deprivation or actual trauma in the brain. You want to trigger stimulation as soon as you can in a controlled way to help the brain rewire. A, to recover areas that were temporarily damaged, and B, to work around areas that are permanently damaged and use other parts of the brain to compensate. So my other background is in music therapy, and for example, there are people who lose the ability to speak, excuse me, but they can sing. So it's different parts of the brain. So there are programs where they teach them to sing, and then slowly make it less and less sing-song, and eventually they pretty much sound like they're speaking, but they're actually using the music centers, the singing centers of the brain to communicate. That's neuroplasticity. That's the ability for the brain to change. Again, 30 years ago we thought brain's damaged, nothing you can do about it, neurons destroyed, there's no recovery. Turns out that was all wrong. When you're older, it's harder, but it is not impossible. So one of my projects was to figure out a program plan for traumatic brain injury recovery. So I looked at it and went, well, there are different stages. In a total coma non-responsive, there's different measurements, but the one I was using was Rancho-Sausalito stage 1. In that stage, they're non-responsive, and really the only people who can work with them are the doctor, the nurses, the physical therapists, working things out for atrophy, etc., to prevent atrophy. So, okay, I can't do a whole lot with that. There's no interaction. Stage 7 is fully okay, no impairment whatsoever. So you have this range between 1 and 7. So then I tried to figure out, well, 2, you can't do tabletop, you can't interact. What about 3? Okay, 3, they got a little bit of movement. Maybe they could do a little computer-based or something, a turn-based computer game that waits for input. If they either have enough eye input or they can move a mouse and click, as long as the computer waits for them, okay, they might be able to do that with computer-based. Stage 4, they've got a little bit of social interaction. They can sit around the table, interact with others. They're tabletop can kick in. Stage 5 on up, they can do more physical stuff so they can do live action more way. But I'm still wondering about Stage 2. Stage 2, basically responsiveness is they're in and out of consciousness for 5, 20, 30 minutes at a time. And they can understand basic directives and questions and can respond with an eye blink or a hand squeeze, something like that. So you can ask binary questions, yes or no. Or if they're a little further along, you can ask them to count something. So what's the most fundamental version of open engagement? Choose your own adventure. So came up with a program plan, which I'm hoping I might actually implement. I just got approved to volunteer at the St. Luke's Rehabilitation Center in Spokane in the traumatic brain injury department. And I'm going to be a volunteer activity participant. I help them do the activities that the recreation therapist plan, and actually do that with them for a few hours once a week. I'm my foot in the door, and they're very open to other ways of trying to do some process. The choose your own adventure approach with stage 2 is the therapist would very simply say, okay, you're in this setting. Do you go through the door, you 1 for yes, 2 for no? Things like that. Just keep it really simple at first. Only work with them 5 to 15 minutes at a time. But what they've already discovered, even without the role-playing game, is when you visualize and imagine something, your brain lights up like a Christmas tree. When you really can, when you close your eyes and you visualize something, either the sounds or the sights or any of those things, your brain lights up as though it's happening. And even the motor stuff, your brain knows how to stop you from walking when you imagine walking. That's what happens when you sleep, that part of the emotions that's paralyzed. So when you do that, you light up the brain, you're exercising the brain. Again, early stages, you can't do it for too long, we get too fatigued. But you can literally just read a short choose your own adventure book to them, which is interactive rather than passive, because they do read to them just stories. And there's benefit to that. But this is bumping it up a little bit in the interactive stage. And potentially parents and loved ones can get involved with that stage too, once they get to a certain level. So that is right, the answer is what's new stage 2. Fairly there, you've already started to use it. Stage 3 is it's a computer-based, you have a turn-based, you have a simple mouse with a pointer or something that move it around very carefully, click for a large motor skill, and they can go through whatever, fantasy setting, sci-fi setting, whatever. And again, you're getting that triggering, and now you're starting to get some physical movement too, so you're working more. When you get to stage 4, when they can potentially speak or sign or communicate on something, either one-on-one with the game master and the player, or in a group setting. Now they're going to have to try to pick up a die. That's more fine motor skills, but that's good practice. May or may not be able to write. They're working on communication skills. They're doing all that imagining. They're having to follow more complex instructions and you can slowly up the complexity as you go. And again, you're getting on neuroplasticity. After stage 5, how many here have seen Knights of Badass? Okay, so some of you know what I'm talking about. So this was actually filmed in Spokane. And it has Summer Glau from Firefly, Sarah Connor Chronicles, many other things. It has Peter Dinklage from Game of Thrones and many other things. It has, I always forget his name from True Blood. He's the brother of anyway, he's in there too. So you have 3. What's that? Blue Child? Okay, no, she's in that too? Oh, I didn't know. Okay. Well, and one of the characters too is in a wheelchair, not in real life, but the character is, and he was actually the principal of Gonzaga Prep at the time. He's a priest, but he's also an actor. And so they had decked out his wheelchair as a chariot. And he was actually the king of that side of the army. And so that's something with the live action role playing stage, that even if they're still in a wheelchair, you can get them engaged in that kind of activity, getting physical, using more of those muscle groups, and doing this the role playing. And so getting to see the progression. So potentially, if someone, that's just my brain dream, and there was some indication they like the role playing world, you could develop an entire recovery program plan. And these things can take several years to go through the process. Doing something they love, and theoretically be hugely beneficial. We'll find out, hopefully, in another year or two, we'll give you an update with something more definitive, but theoretically there. So that's another area of potential use. So many different populations could potentially benefit from it. Anything else? Anybody else know of any other projects that are going on related to that? You mentioned some. Anybody else know of any educational therapeutic uses? No? Okay. There is apparently one here in Washington. I just got contacted yesterday asking about developing one for people who have aggressive behavior and working on their social skills, and they want to develop a program for their school. That's here in Washington State. They didn't specify yet. So it's happening in the state sites. So I will always update on there. There's both the blog and the news. The blog is less formal. I post whatever I find when I find it. So, it's not as rigid analysis or anything like that, but it's sharing the news and letting everybody know and give you out things to check out. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, all the social networks, trying to just get the word out. That's all under RPG Research. So if you go to youtube.com/RPG Research, you've got videos there. Some of these presentations, like the TBI programs on there. If you go to facebook.com/RPG Research, all of these RPG Research, you'll find more information. And all those linked to from the website. So I hope that was helpful for you.
Can you tell us your name one more time?
Hawke Robinson.
Fantastic. Thanks.
So I'm the founder of the project and been a gamer since '79, and hopefully be certified recreation therapist creating role-playing game therapy. So thank you.